Seches Kiddushin Daf contains one Mishnah and three primary sugyas. It takes us to the end of the second parak of the Masechta, and near the end of the Daf begins the third parak of the Masechta. So the three sugyas are, first of all, a contradiction in one opinion about chulin, that is nishchat ba'azara, whether or not that is an Isser Hana de'iraisa. Second sugya will be the question of transference of Isser Hana from something to money, whether that Isser transfers to money that you use to buy Isser Hana. Then we'll get to our next Mishnah, and the Mishnah discusses more things which you cannot use for Kiddushin. The Gemara Sugi will be that of Toivas Hana, the choice as to who to give your Truma and your Meiser to. Does that have value or not? So let's begin. So we've been discussing the concept of Chulin Shenishchat Ba'azar. We said that that's Isser Hana, and we had our Mishnah which said that you can't use it for Kiddushin. The Gemara now brings a conflicting opinion of Shimon, who says that you can use it for Kiddushin. We're going to have a contradiction whether he holds that as a Deraisa or Derabbanan. So the Gemara begins that Mar Yehuda found Rav Yosef and Rav Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Bar Bachana, who were standing at the doorway of the Beis Medrash of Rabbah. And Mar Yehuda said to them, the Kasha have a brisa that shows that there's an opinion that is Reb Shimon, who holds that Chulin Nishchat Ba'azara, a non-hektish animal, non-carbon animal, which was slaughtered in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Azara. That we see there's a contradiction as to whether that is Asr B'Hana Deraisa or Asr B'Hana Derabbanan. So first of all, we have a brisa that clearly shows that it's Asr B'Hana only Derabbanan at best, and that's because Reb Shimon says you're allowed to use it for Kiddushin. So he says if you have Chulin that was Nishchan and Azara, or if you have Basar B'Chalav or Peter Chamar, Reb Shimon says all these things are valid Kiddushin. Now, Peter Chamar and Basar B'Chalav we've seen before in our last after Reb Shimon holds that it's not an Isser Hana. Chul Shenishchan Ba'azara is an Isser Hana, but Reb Shimon obviously holds that it's only Derabbanan that is Isser Hana. And therefore, if you use it, the Kiddushin is valid because in Midaraisa it's not a Hazabada and it has value. Why is there an Isser Derabbanan? So Rashi explains that the Isser Derabbanan is that people see somebody who brought a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash, or they brought an animal into the Beis HaMikdash. He shechts it there, and then he starts having enough from it. So people are going to assume that what happened with this, it was a carbon. But a psul happened between the shchita and the hakrava of the blood. And therefore, the shchita they saw, and the hakrava never happened because the psul happened then. That's what it looks like. That's what happens if you bring an animal to the Beis HaMikdash and you shecht it, and you never put it on the mizbeach. It looks like a animal which was brought as a carbon, and a psul happened after the shchita. Now, the halacha there is that it's also b'hana. If this person were to be nene, were to be permitted to be nena from his chulin in the azar, people will think that a carbon which was nishchat and developed a psul is also mutar b'hana, and that's wrong, and therefore we have to asr it. Okay, so this is all the brisa, the first source about Reb Shimon. The second source, he said, though, is I have a brisa where he says that there's this isser of chulin be'azara, and it says that it applies also to a chaya. So if you have an animal which not only is it chulin, but it's a chaya. Now, in this brisa, Reb Shimon is arguing on the Tanakama. The machlekes is whether you burn the chulin ba'azara or you do kura, you bury it. But that's not the focus of our right here. The focus is why is there an isser on a chaya? If it's an isser deraisa, so I understand why there would be an isser on a chaya. Because the chaya looks like chulin ba'azara. So chulin ba'azara, chaya is chulin ba'azara. A chaya cannot be brought as a carbon. So if it's a deraisa, so I understand we have to ask for chaya as a gzeira to all other types of chulin. However, if it is only derabbanan, because people are confused with a carbon, a chaya can't be confused with a carbon. So why should it be asr? So this brisa indicates that it's not a derabbanan. So therefore we have our contradiction. In Reb Shimon's opinion, is chulin shenishchan b'azar asr derabbanan or asr deraisa. So they were stumped. They didn't have an answer, and they went to ask Rabbah. So Rabbah said, I see you've been stumped by the Palga, by the one who argues with everybody. Rashi says that Mar Yehuda used to start up with people and look for ways to prove them wrong, and therefore he called him the one who argues. So Rambam said, don't be so stumped. The answer is as follows. Reb Shimon holds chulin that's slaughtered in the azar is a dairaisa. That which he says you're allowed to use it for Kiddushin is talking about a particular case. He's talking about where you shechted it, but it was a treifa. And there's a machlekes whether an animal that's slaughtered as a treifa, is that a kosher shchita, or is that not a valid shchita as far as all other halachos of shchita are concerned. One of those halachos would be, is this a shchita in the azara? Now obviously you can't eat it because it's a treifa, but if it's a valid shchita, then this is chulin shenishchad bazar. It should be aser bahana as chulin shenishchad bazar. That's the opinion of the Chachamim. Rav Shimon holds that a shchita of a treifa is not a valid shchita. It does not create any other halachos, and therefore it's not chulin shenishchad ba'azara, and therefore it's just a regular nevela, and it's mutter bahana. And that is why Reb Shimon here says that this case is, the Kiddushin is valid. However, he says that you require sreifa in a standard case, and you also have to aser a chaya, because it's not a dirabanan, it's a dairaisa. Okay, the Gemara returns to the Mishnah, the last line in our previous Mishnah, where we had seen that all the things which are aser b'hana, if you do sell them, the money that you use to purchase them, or that you sell them for, does not get the Isser Hana. That is, the Isser Hana doesn't transfer from the object to the money that it is bought with. So the Gemara says, what is the source for that? So the Gemara says, because you see about Avodah Zarah that the Isser transfers from the Avodah Zarah object to the money that you use to purchase, and it's only there and not anywhere else. Where do you see that happens? Because it says, Vayisachir Kamayu, anything which you develop from the Avodah Zarah has the same Isser, it transfers. So that shows that everything else, because you have to say it there, it shows that everything else does not transfer. So the Gemara says, well, why does it show that? It should show the opposite. You should learn it as a binyanav, just like by Avodah Zarah it transfers, it should transfer everywhere else. So the Gemara says, no, because you have Shnei Ksuma Ban Ke'echad. There's two places where it says that it transfers. One is the Isser of Avodah Zarah, and the other is the Isser and the special halachas of Shemitah fruit. Shemitah fruit, it says Yoivel Hi Kodesh Tiyah Lachem. It has a din of Kodesh, just like Hekdesh, the Kedusha transfers to money that you exchange it for. Shemitah's halachas also transfer to money that you exchange it for. And therefore, these two things, the Torah says clearly, Shneiksim Haban Ke'echad and Ein Belamdim. You don't go any further, as we've seen across Shas. Now the Gemara just brings the brisa in full about Shriyas. So it says Yoivel Hi Kodesh Tiyah Lachem, to be just like Kodesh, just like Hekdesh, which transfers its Kedusha to something that you exchange it for. So Shemitah, the same thing applies. Now, you may think that it itself becomes Chulin, just like Hekdesh, where you transfer the Kedusha to something, the original thing that was Hekdesh becomes Chulin. So therefore it says, Tihiyeh, it stays Kodesh. So the Bryce explains that the original Shemitah fruits will always stay with their Kedusha. Something which is transferred, that it is exchanged with, will develop that Kedusha. However, that loses Kedusha if it's transferred further. It brings an example. Let's say you have Shemitah fruits, and you exchange that for meat. So the meat gets a halacha of Shemitah, and it needs beer during the time of beer, just like the Shemitah fruit. The Shemitah fruits still stay with their halacha of Shemitah. And if you took the meat and you exchange it for fish, that meat now becomes regular, doesn't have any halachas, but the fish has. Transfer that for wine, and those halachos move to the wine and not the fish, transfer to oil, and it goes to the oil and not to the wine. However, the fruit have the halachos all along. So whatever is the last one to receive that kedusha, the last one in the chain of transfers is the one that has those halachos, but the fruit itself have those halachos as well. Okay, so here you see Shnei Ksuma Haban Ke'echad Ein Belamdim. That's why we don't learn to anywhere else in Kol Terakula that the Isra no transfers. So it says Gemara, what are you going to do according to the opinion? It holds Shnei Ksuma Haban Ke'echad Ein Belamdim. What are you going to do here? So the Gemara says, because there's a miyat. There is a limiting term written in both places, written in Avodah Zarah and written in Shemitah. Here it says Kicher Mahu. The who limits just this and not anywhere else. And by Shemitah it says Evel He, just this and not anywhere else. This completes the Gemara's commentary on the last Mishnah. Now we begin the next Mishnah, which discusses a number of other things which you might use for Kiddushin. These are Chal Kiddushin. So it says that somebody is Mekadosh with Trumos. That refers to Truma Gedayla, the first Truma that Yisrael takes from his crops, or Trumas Meiser, that the Levi takes of his crops, both of which are given, that the Levi takes from his Meiser that he received, both of which are given to the Kohen. Next on the list is Meiseris. That's Meiser Rishon and Meiser Oni. Not Meiser Sheni was discussed in the last Mishnah. Matanos is parts of an animal that have to be given to the kohen. Mechatas and Efer para are the water and the ashes that are mixed with the paraduma to make the special fluid that's used to be mitaher in tame mace. All these things, they all have certain amount of value when you hold them, and if you give them, the Kiddushin is chal. And this is true even if the Mekadosh is a Yisrael, even if it's not a kohen. For those things that are matnas kahuna, it's true for them as well. Now, the Gemara is going to go into a different sugya and come back around to this Mishnah, and that is the sugya of Teivas Hana. When a Yisrael is holding truma that he separated, so the Yisrael can give it to whichever kohen he wants to. He can't keep it. It's not his. The truma is not his. It's not his property. It has to be given to the kohen, and therefore the truma itself doesn't have value of the fruits, the face value of the fruits. He does not own. However, he could choose which kohen to give it to. That choice, he may even get paid for. Somebody may pay him and say, hey, give your truma to my friend this kohen. Now, the question is that choice considered to be something of value? Can you sell that? Can you be Mekadeshin Isha with that? So Ula says, that value, which is what's called a toivas hana, which means a little bit of the gain. So that has no value. That's what Ula holds. So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Abba asked Ula, our Mishnah clearly says you could be Mekadesh with Trumas, even Yisrael. You can be Mekadesh with Trumas and Meisers and Matanas. It also mentioned Mechatos and Efer Hapara. Now, how does this work? It must be because it's the Teivas Hana. The Yisrael has the truma. He could give it to whichever kohen he wants. That must have value, and by giving that truma to an isha, he gives her that choice. So that must be the value that he's giving her. That must be what the Kiddushin is. So since this Kiddushin is valid, you see that Teivas Hana is money. It is considered to be having value. Why do you say it does not have any value? So the Gemara answers, we're not talking about where the Yisrael has truma that he separated and now has to be given to a kohen. We're talking about truma that was already in possession of the kohen, was already given to the kohen or belongs to the kohen, and therefore it's the kohen's property. What then happened is that this Yisrael inherited it. So his mother's father was a kohen, and it fell to him in Yerusha. So now he inherited truma that's already been given to a kohen. So there is no mitzvah to give it to a kohen, and it's his, belongs to him. He can even sell it to a kohen if he wants to. So that has real face value. Maybe not the same face value that it would have if you could sell it to Yisrael, but has value and it can be sold. And that's what we're referring to. Now he adds in, we're not talking about a standard case. We're not referring to truma that was already separated and given to a kohen, because then there wouldn't be a chiddush. We're talking about where his grandfather had his own crops, and he has truma that comes from those crops, and that belongs to him. It doesn't have to be given to a kohen. And it's the reason this is a chiddush is because this is holding like the opinion that a kohen who has crops doesn't have to separate truma. The truma is considered to be separated automatically, and it belongs to him automatically. And that's a chiddush. That halacha is not clear. That's a chiddush. That's the case, and that's the chiddush. But there's the crux of the answer is that this truma is already given to a kohen, and therefore it's not teivas hana. It's not the choice which kohen to give it to. It's the value that he can sell it to a kohen. That's what he's being mekadesh with. On a similar note, the Gemara presents another version of this discussion about Teivas Hana. The Gemara says that Rabbi Chia Bar Avin asked it from Rav Huna, what is the halacha about Teivas Hana? Does it have value or not? He brought the same proof from the Mishnah, and he said, didn't we learn that this Mishnah is not referring to truma that the Yisrael separated and has to give to a kohen? We're talking about truma that has already been given to the kohen. And he said, oh, I see you are a huta. So when he heard that, he was embarrassed. He thought Hutza means that he's out of the sugya. He doesn't really know what's flying. So he explained, no, that's not what I meant by Hutza. I meant that you hold like Rav Asi of Hutzal. That's what I mean by calling you a Hutza. That's how he learns the sugya over there. So you're saying like him. Now, the Gemara wants to show that this question of Teivas Hana, does it have value or not, is actually Machlekes Tanaim. The Gemara brings a surprise to which Machlekes Tanaim that the Gemara wants to pin on this question. Machlekes over there is if somebody steals tevel, that is, crops that have not had truma or meiser removed from them, and now he has to pay it back to the owner. How much does he have to pay back? Does he have to pay the full tevel value, or can he subtract the truma meiser that has to be taken from it, which the original owner, the Yisrael, can't keep that anyway? The original owner has to give that to a kohen and a Levi, so it doesn't get to stay by him. Now, a kohen and a Levi could come collect that, but the thief won't have to give it to him because he'll say, I don't want to give it to you, I want to give it to somebody else. So the question is, does he have to give that back to the Yisrael, that Truma and Meiser, or can he subtract it off because it doesn't belong to the original Kayin, to the original Yisrael? So on that, Rabbi says he has to give back the full amount, and Rabbi Yehuda says he can subtract it off. So if you hold Tevis Hana is value, so then he should have to give it back so that the original owner can decide what he wants to do with it. Or there's some Rishonim who say he doesn't have to give it back, all of it, so that he can decide what to do with it. You just pay him the value of the Tevis Hana, which is not equal to all those crops. But either way, the Gemara wants to say that the Machlekes is about Tevis Hana. Do you have to give him the rights to decide which Kayin and Levi he wants to give that to? So the Gemara wants to say, here you see a Machlekes, is Tevis Hana money or not? And the Gemara is going to show there is a number of other ways to explain this Machlekes, not based on that question. So the first explanation is that we're referring to where the original owner had inherited the tevel from his grandfather, his maternal grandfather, who is a Kohen, and he never separated Truma. And the question is there an automatic separation of Truma on a Kohen's own crop, and therefore it belongs to him, and he doesn't have to give it away? That would be what this Machlekes was about. The second shad is the Machlekes is over halacha said by Shmuel, which is that you can just take off one kernel of grain, and that takes off the obligation of Truma, which Shmuel calls chita achas b'teres sakri, although you should take a 40th, a 50th, or a 60th, but technically you resolve the mitzvah with one kernel. So then you can't subtract, if you hold that way, you can't subtract the value of the Truma from the entire grain, because you just have to take off one kernel, and that has a negligible value. So therefore you wouldn't be able to say subtract anything. You could just say, I was only planning on giving one chita, what are you subtracting? Therefore, the Machlekes is whether you can do that or not. That would be the second pshat in this Machlekes. The Gemara's third pshat is there a knas? Perhaps we penalize the thief and we say you have to pay back the full amount, even though you shouldn't really have to, because it is Truma, but we penalize you for stealing, and therefore you have to pay back the full amount anyway. And the fourth pshat is that we're not penalizing the thief, we're actually penalizing the homeowner. He really should get a full payment back, but the Machlokes says, do we have a penalty against him? Because why did he have a tevel hanging around? He should have taken care of it right away. Now, we conclude the second parak of the Masechta by analyzing the last part of the Mishnah, which it said you could be Mekadesh with paraduma water. So I ask us, there's a brisa that says you can't be Mekadesh, you can't use as value anything which has a mitzvah service to it. So you can't take money for judging. If you do, your judgment is canceled. You can't take money for testifying. If you do, the testimony is void. You can't take money for sprinkling paraduma water on someone. If you do, the water is invalidated. And the same thing applies to the ashes. So how could you then use this paraduma water or ashes for Kiddushin? You're not allowed to use that as a thing of value. It's an object of mitzvah. So where it says there's different services. The service of filling up and bringing the water, that's mundane. That you're allowed to get paid for, and that's what he's using here. That's the value that he's using for this Kiddushin. However, the sprinkling and the Kiddush, the washing, that's the mitzvah. That you can't get paid for, and if that you would use, that would be no good. And if you look carefully in the words of our Mishnah, and this brisa that says that it's no good, you'll see this. As our Mishnah said, the water of the chatos and the ashes, that you could use, and that is because it was brought by someone and filled up by someone. Here it refers to lahazai sulakadesh, the sprinkling and the washing. So there and the kedusha, that you can't do, and that specifically refers to that, and that's why that part is forbidden. So we'll just begin the third paragraph. The Mishnah discusses three situations where somebody was trying to be Mekadesh Anisha, and someone else got to her first. So the first case is where someone made a shliach and said, go be Mekadesh this woman for me, and the shliach went and was Mekadesh her to himself. So that Kiddushin is valid. She's married to the shliach, and she's not married to the first guy. The Gemara points out that is improper of what he did. It refers to it as halach, he went, and halach meaning he went in ramas, he went in trickery, and he did something he's not supposed to do. However, he got away with it. Second situation is where somebody gave a woman Kiddushin and said it's only chal in 30 days from now, and in the meantime she took Kiddushin from someone else. So the second Kiddushin is chal because it is chal before the first one, and by the time the first one tries to be chal, it's too late, she's already an Ish. And the third case is where he gives her Kiddushin, and he says it's going to be chal from now after 30 days, meaning in 30 days from now, it'll be chal retroactively from this moment. Then she went and got Kiddushin from someone else, and 30 days later, this Kiddushin is chal before the second Kiddushin. Now what? So the Mishnah says she's a suffix, or she's partially mekudeshes to each of them, and therefore she can't eat truma from either of them. She can't eat truma not from her original father's household if she was a kohen, and not from either of them if they were kohanim, as opposed to the second case which we had said before, where she was completely mekudeshes to the second person, and if she was the bas Yisrael and he was a kohen, she could eat truma on his account.